So everyone talks about getting into product management, the courses, the frameworks, the LinkedIn posts, but nobody actually explains what you do on a Monday morning when you sit down at your laptop. So I'm going to show you. I am a product manager in a health tech company, and today I'm breaking down what I actually do day to day in plain, simple English. If you've ever been curious about PM as a career, or you are in healthcare and wonder what the tech side actually looks like, stay with me. So I'm Esther. I'm a pharmacist turned product manager, and if you haven't seen my last video, I actually spent 9 months job hunting after leaving a toxic workplace, and I just started a new role in health. So people have been asking me, but what does a PM actually do? So let's get straight into it. So what is a PM and who is a product manager? Right? A product manager is essentially the person responsible for a product, what it does, who it serves, and why it exists. If you think about it, you're not building the product yourself. You're actually working with the likes of the engineers, the designers, the customer service, the QA testers, right? So you are not designing the product yourself. That is the job of a designer. You're the person who actually figures out what should be built and why we want to build it. So you're someone that actually brings the vision up and work in line with the business vision or the business outcome. So think of it like being the translator between the business and the technical team. So you understand both worlds and you help them work together to get to the goal, which is to actually work for the outcome and for the betterment of the business. So what actually makes a health tech PM different from another PM in a different tech industry like fin, right? In health tech specifically, your product has real stakes here. You're not building a social media feature at all. You are actually working on something that affects patient outcomes, it affects patients' lives, clinical workflows, or health data. That means regulation matters a lot here. You have to think about regulations while you're building something for these people. The evidence also matters as well. Your evidence that as to why you think what you're building is going to work for them, you need to have evidence to back up why you're thinking what you're thinking and why you're thinking it's going to work for the patient or the users, which could also be clinicians. Also, user research matters a lot, even more because your users might be clinicians, as I mentioned, might be patients, or they could be both. And for me, it's one of the reasons my pharmacy background has actually been an asset for me, because as a clinical pharmacist, I understand the clinical side of the users I am building for. And this is one of the reasons my pharmacy background has actually been an asset for me, because I understand as a clinical pharmacist the clinical side of the users I am building for. I understand what the clinical workflow would be like real life as a clinical specialist myself. What my actual day really looks like is that my mornings usually start with checking in on what the team is working on. That's when we have the daily stand-ups, mainly at 9 a.m. 50 minutes, where the engineers talk me through what they are doing, what they did yesterday, what they plan to do today, or if they have any blockers, if there's any decisions that needs to be made before the day gets going. And a big part of my role is actually meetings. I have lots of meetings daily, but they are purposeful meetings, not just being in meetings because you want to be in a meeting's sake, but actually purposeful and intentional meetings. So, and these meetings could involve talking to users or stakeholders to sort of understand what they need, talking to engineers to understand what's feasible in terms from the tech point of view, and also aligning everyone as a business on the priorities that we are working on. Then there is the thinking work, where I sit down, I have block time to start writing specifications, where I define requirements, and this is me putting together product requirements on what we want to build and why we want to build our feature, prioritizing the roadmap, make sure that what we are building is actually in line with the roadmap as we have prepared for the quarter, and what are we building next and why are we building it instead of building something else. And also as well, I need to make sure that I look at the evidence as to why we are building this thing. I need to come with data, I need to come with facts and figures to show why we are building A instead of building B. And then there is the reactive stuff that happens in between, where things could break, and not that things could break, things actually break, where you're doing something, all of a sudden you go to test and it's not functioning as it should, then your priorities will shift, right? And sometimes your stakeholder would need something from it that is not even on your to-do list for that day, but you have to attend to it. So part of the job is also handling that without losing the momentum on everything else that I'm working on at the same time. So that's literally what my typical day is. For example, recently I've been launching a product for my new complaint, and a typical day is obviously we start with a stand-up and we are all happy thinking, oh my god, we've uploaded it to the app stores, they're going to think, and then all of a sudden in the middle of it you hear back from Apple Store and they've rejected it, and you have to go back to look at why they've rejected it. Okay, what can we work on? Okay, they are thinking something is not complete, the performance is not functioning. Okay, reach out to my engineers, how can we do this, can we make these changes quickly so I can submit it back, because I'm working on tight deadlines, right? So each day comes on its own. You can't really have a planned day. If you have a planned day, sometimes when you come in on that day, your plan might have to go out of the window. It's about you being able to work under pressure and being able to identify what am I prioritizing and what do I want to focus on today. So now to the major question is, how has being a pharmacist actually prepared me for this role or for this journey? What a lot of healthcare professionals don't know is that there's a lot of skills you have that are transferable, and there's a lot of transferable skills that people don't talk about. So one of the skills that really prepared me for this journey was actually clinical decision making, because as a pharmacist, you're constantly weighing up evidence, you're weighing up risk, you're looking at patient needs, right, on a typical day. And that's exactly what product prioritization is, because you're constantly weighing what you're doing. There's always risk of what you're doing. You have to think of how are you mitigating this risk, what are your assumptions that something could go wrong, and what are your plans to actually deal with that issue, right? So your clinical decision making actually equates to product prioritization. The next skill is patient counseling. Guys, as a pharmacist, I'm so used to explaining complex things in simple language to my patients, and that's a core PM skills where you're communicating clearly across different audiences. And when I mean different audiences, you want to make sure that what you're communicating to your user is clear and it is free of jargons and they understand what your product is doing. You also want to make sure that what you're communicating to the engineers are straight to the point, and it is technical enough for an engineer to pick up your user stories and acceptance criteria and put that together into a build and build the feature, right? Another thing in terms of communication is that the way I'll communicate with the engineers is not the same way I'm going to communicate with my CEO or other senior stakeholders, because sometimes they don't need to understand the exact jargon of what we are building. They don't even understand it, no matter how you write it, no matter how you explain it. I remember one of the things I learned from my previous job that stood with me, that my manager said to me, is that make sure that when you're communicating as if you're explaining something to your mom. So how do you want your mom to understand what you are saying? You have to explain in a way that your mom would understand, or you have to explain in a way that a 5-year-old could actually understand what you're trying to say. So you have to understand where that communication clearly comes from. And you as a clinician, you do this every day. Patients counseling, you're talking to them about their amlodipine, talking to them about their paracetamol, talking to them about their cough. This is what they should not do. You're speaking in clear language, free of jargon, where every user and everybody you're communicating with, or anybody you're working with, can actually understand what you're saying, right? So patient counseling does equate to communicating clearly across cross-functional teams and across different audiences. The third skill here is understanding clinical workflows. Guys, as a pharmacist, I know how a GP surgery runs, because I've been a GP pharmacist and I know how it works. I've been a community pharmacist and I know the whole process of how it works, where everybody just feel like, okay, I want my medication, just have to stick a label on it just takes 2 seconds. Why is it taking so long for me to get my prescription, right? Not knowing that a lot of work goes on behind the scene when you are picking and working with a prescribed medication. For example, you get a prescribed medication for a doctor for a patient, right? The patient is waiting. You look at the prescription. You have to clinically assess the prescription to make sure that that prescription is clinically okay. There is no error. You can see the history of the patient. It's not going to cause any interaction. This patient can actually take this medication. Not just clinically assessing the prescription, you have to do accuracy checking as well. Do I have the date of birth? Do I have the patient's age? Do I have the patient address? Is this assigned to the right patient in front of me wanting this medication, right? Then you look into it, look at the medication that you've picked off the shelf, look at what is on the prescription, and check to see that they align, that what you've picked is actually amlodipine and is not allopurinol, because they do mistakes like that could happen because sometimes most of their boxes are looking the same and of the same colors, right? I also want to make sure that you have picked a tablet instead of a capsule, even though they have the same drug name and the same strength. So understanding clinical workflows, all of these things literally equate, because you have to look at how prescriptions are processed, how clinicians actually work, and that domain knowledge is rare in tech. So when you're building a product in tech and from a health tech perspective, you're thinking how a clinician would think. You already understand what their process is, so you want to make sure that your features is thinking and your features actually consolidate those processes for clinicians. You don't want your features to come and add more problems to their processes that could cause error and could end up risking a patient's life. So you want to make sure that your feature that you are building, your feature that you're working on is actually in line with the processes of how clinicians work and how patients understand things. And that domain that you have as a clinical person in a tech space is a very, very rare advantage, and that is something that makes you stand out in a tech world. The other skill is working under pressure and regulation. Guys, as a pharmacist and being in a pharmacy environment, pharmacy is a regulated environment. Day in, day out. So is SAMD, and SAMD means software as a medical device. So in health tech, when you're building a software as a medical device, you need to make sure that you understand the regulation binding that. You have to make sure that you meet every regulatory requirements, nothing is missing, every I's are dotted and every T's are crossed to the T, right? Then that mindset transfers directly to the role as a product manager. Pressure will come. For example, I'm about to launch in and there's a lot of pressure that, okay, I'm waiting for this regulatory to be signed up. If it's not signed up, I won't be able to go live. You know, those kind of thing, right? Also, as well, there's this pressure of, okay, have I ticked all the boxes in terms of regulation? Are we sure that we are law abiding? That's when we release this thing, we are not going breaking any laws and we are not making any patient's life at risk. We're not putting any patient's life at risk. We're not putting any clinicians at risk of using the tools that we are providing for them, right? So working under pressure and regulation is a huge transferable skill that you have as a healthcare professional that's easily transferred into your role in health tech. So let's talk about the common misconceptions that we have in this journey, like how can a healthcare professional transition into tech? And it's not even just any tech, because guys, you know that there are different areas of tech, right? So let's focus on health tech to be precise. There's a lot of misconceptions running around that I want to debunk and help you to sort of understand and hopefully get those misconceptions off your mind, and you can actually focus on taking that journey if that is what you really want to do. The first thing is that you need a computer science degree. Guys, you don't. You don't. You already have a degree at hand. My whole 5 years, mainly actually 6 years of being a pharmacist, studying pharmacy, sitting the exam and being qualified as a pharmacist is no waste. Everything I learned in my pharmacy degree is useful to me today. You don't need to have a computer science degree. Understanding technology can be important because that is the knowledge that you have to learn how technology works, but you don't need to learn how to code. Not every role in tech requires coding. For example, I'm a product manager and I don't know how to code. I don't understand the code jargon, the multiple letters and numbers showing on a black screen. I don't understand it, right? But I understand how technology works. I understand what I'm building, what I need to build and how it needs to work, right? That I don't need to know how to code to be able to do that. I can have so many visions. All I need to do is liaise with my engineers to see this I am thinking, is this possible technically? Is this possible from a code building point of view? Right? So you definitely do not need a computer science degree. No data, no peace. The next one is that, guys, people say PMs are the boss of the team. And when I mean PMs, I'm talking about product manager here. I do know that sometimes in some areas, project managers also are called PMs. In this context, I'm talking about product manager. They feel like product managers are the boss of the team. And that's not true. Guys, I don't even want to take that title to be the boss of the team, because that means I have to take responsibility for everything that goes wrong, even though I do, right? So no, I want to share the responsibility around. That's absolutely not true. As a product manager, you actually have influence, but no direct authority. You have influence as to what you want to do. You can influence people to buy into your opinion and your ideas, but you don't have any direct authority, right? It's a very collaborative role. You work with the engineers, you work with your designers, you work with your QA testers, you work with your senior stakeholders like the likes of the commercial team, The data scientists, the researchers, you work collaboratively with them to be able to get their buy-in on what you want to build and your ideas. And taking ideas together as well helps you as a PM to actually visualize what you're working on in a more detail and with more intentionality. So PMs are not the boss of the team. You actually influence, but you also don't have direct authority. The next thing is that PM work, it's mostly strategy and no execution. I know. I do know where that can come from, because that is where, so there's a bit of an overlapping between being a product manager and a project manager. So some say that, okay, product manager thinks of the vision of what you want to build, while a project manager executes. But in reality, especially in smaller healthcare companies like startups, you are hands-on constantly. For example, I work in an early startup at the moment and I'm hands-on. I execute most of my projects. As I'm thinking of the vision, I also execute at the same time. I'm the product manager and I'm also the project manager of it, because I have to be hands-on constantly. Even in my role, I also do design work because I don't have a product designer. And because of that, that is a skill I had already learned that's actually helping me in my workplace right now. So I design things on Figma. I design pages, how I want a button to look, and things like that. So I do all of that. So it might be true on paper, but in reality, it might not be true depending on the type of company that you're working in. If you're working in a big company, that might be true. But if you're working in a small health tech companies like startups, that might not be true. Another misconception I want to close here is that you need years and years of tech experience to break in. Guys, I've been saying, I don't know how else I will say this thing. Your clinical background can fast track you into health tech specifically. You know why? Because you have an advantage. Somebody that has a computer science degree and even has experience in tech does not have. And that's because you have a clinical background. You understand the clinical processes. You understand the clinical workflow of how things work, which these people don't have. So your clinical background is a fast track into health tech. Literally, that was what gave me most of my interviews, and that was what gave me most of the job offers I had, and the one I got today. The fact that I'm a pharmacist by background. I even remember thanking my supervisor when I was doing my pre-registration, where I wanted to drop out and say, I'm not doing it, I just want to go into tech. I'm not interested. There's no point being qualified because I don't want to become a pharmacist. Thank God I listened to that man that day, because being qualified as a pharmacist now is what is opening doors for me in the health tech industry. So guys, your experience, you don't need lots of tech experience. You don't need computer science degree. You don't need years and years of experience, because your clinical background is actually lots of experience that you already have at hand that you can easily transfer into your role in health. So guys, if you are in healthcare and you have ever thought about making a move into tech, I hope this has made it feel a little less like a foreign world to you. Guys, it's more accessible than people make it seem, especially with a clinical background that you have at hand. You don't have to start from scratch. Next week, I'm going to be sharing how I actually made the move, the full journey from pharmacy to PM, what I changed on my CV, and how I finally started getting interviews. So if you don't want to miss it, make sure you subscribe. To that, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and also share to your friends so that we are looking to transition, or people that you've actually been having this conversation, to let them see that this is possible. Someone has done it and they can actually learn one or two from me. And also, as well, drop a comment for me. Let me know, are you in healthcare and curious about tech? And I would love to know where you are right now. Have you started the journey, or are you still thinking about it? Let me know in the comment section, and I'll read every comment. I promise to read every comment and reply every single one of them. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in my next video. Have a good day. Bye.